Jesse is the youngest of my two boys, and he was a beautiful child. And everyone that knew Jesse knew his kindness and sweetness and humbleness. Jesse smiled all the time. He came into this world smiling, and he was a breeze. He was easy, beautiful. He was a complete joy. My son died of fentanyl poisoning on February 16th of 2022. Jesse was a passenger in a car accident on December 21st of 2011. He was taken to shock trauma, where they had to perform emergency surgery on him. And during that time, he was 16, just a few months before his 17th birthday. No doctor or nurse ever came to me and said, "Mom, this is what we're giving your son for pain. It's highly addictive. It's an opioid, and these are the signs you need to look for." I had no idea. And no doctor ever discussed the serious addiction that came with opioids. Jesse was not an experimental user. And when he left the hospital, I was dealing with my oldest son's addiction, who did go into high school to experiment. And Cody was a lot more obvious in his use. So my focus was on that. Jesse flew under my radar. He just flew under my radar. He was very quiet. He was very shy. Never caused trouble. Easygoing. And he kept everything inside. So it took quite a long time before I realized that there was a severe problem with Jesse. He could go to work every day. He took care of himself, personal hygiene, things like that. He was not, one to be on street corners or anything like that. My boys were opposite, introvert, extrovert. And so Jesse just kept everything in. Jesse just didn't show signs of addiction. He just got up every day, and he either went to school or he went to work, and it looked normal. And the way that my other son was dealing with it was just so scary. And so Cody just needed that immediate help, and Jesse he just was able to hide it, unfortunately, too well. And then he did go to rehab. He went to rehab off and on. It's hard for me to remember now, between two boys in and out of treatment for many years at different times. But Jesse went, and it was really hard for him with his anxiety to be in that type of setting. It's hard to remember that first treatment, whether he stayed the entire time or not. I think he always stayed, if not the entire time, pretty close to the time. But back then, we're talking around 2015, maybe. It was very hard to get children, I call them children, but even young adults, into treatment for 30 days or 28 days. We had to fight for 2 weeks at the time. Moms had to fight with insurance companies. The treatment centers had to constantly battle back and forth, so they would get approved for maybe 3 to 5 days or 3 to 7 days, which is nothing. It's kind of to wean them off the opioid physical part of it. So many of us, just as parents, were just sick of that revolving door. And then by the time an insurance company may approve those 30 days, the counselor is telling them that they may have to leave in a week or two. So you tell an addict that they're able to leave treatment in a week or two, their head's already out the door before their body is. So this was an ongoing battle with many families, at least that I'm aware of and that I worked with in the state of Maryland. And then it depends on the insurance as well. So if you have private insurance for substance use, that's a great thing. If you have state insurance for mental health, that's a great thing. But if you have the opposite, not so good. So state insurance, only so many treatment centers in the state of Maryland accepted Medicaid. And then it would be that battle of a week to 2 weeks, which is nothing for anybody to battle this disease. You know, it's different for everybody, but the evil of the opioids is how it hijacks not just the mind, but the physical body. And with fentanyl now, it's such a game changer in so many ways. The heroin was bad enough for people to get off of, but the fentanyl, you hear people tell you it hurts to the bone, literally hurts their bones. So when you have a hijacked brain and a person's hurting like that, and they know something that small can help them stop that horrific physical pain, what do you think somebody's going to do? They want the pain to stop. So it's just such an evil. It's such an evil. So in January of 2022, Jesse was having a really hard time, and he wanted to get back to work. And one of the jobs that he was wanting to get to, they knew that he needed treatment. So he needed to go to treatment. He knew that, and he was tired of living this way. So on January 17th of 2022, which was his brother's birthday, he got up that morning and he said, "I'm ready to go." And the weekend before, it was just him and I at our home. I was still at my parents' house at the time, and he was very sick. And we got to spend this amazing God-given time together, just him and I. And he would come out to the living room when he was feeling a little bit better, and we would share songs and we would talk. And I asked him, I said, "Jesse, again, did you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Because I just don't think this world's going to be here that much longer." He said, "I don't think so either, Mom." And so when he woke up on Monday morning, he said, "I'm ready to go." So we called the treatment center, and I took him January 17th of 2022. And he completed that treatment successfully. And unbeknownst to me at the time, a person was allowed to come in to Hope House Treatment Center in Crownsville, Maryland, and host an AA or an NA meeting. And this person was from Stella Recovery House. And he was not fully vetted to do this. And he recruited Jesse to come to Stella House, to the recovery house, after he left treatment. It's February. Sometimes beds are scarce in the winter because everybody's trying to, either come off the streets or whatever the reason. So Jesse had said this was what was going on, and he had a bed opening. So I was working at home to also try to find another place for him. We were working, talking about funding and different things because it costs to go to sober living. So I picked Jesse up on February 11th, which was a Friday. I took him to his shop, his old boss's, and he went and picked up his truck, picked up some things from the house, and we ran some errands. And the manager, the house manager at Stella House knew this because I had talked to him a few times before Jesse had even got to the house. And he went Friday night. He came back to the house Saturday. He looked great. This was Saturday, February 12th of 2022. He went and got his hair cut. He had made a list of priorities of the things that he wanted to work on once he got off fentanyl, off the drugs. And Sunday, I didn't see him. It was Sunday. Monday was Valentine's Day, and he went back to work that day, and he was doing great. I'd made dinner, so he stopped by the house after work, and he pulled in the driveway, and I was at the front door when I saw him pull up. And he was smiling, this beautiful smile from ear to ear. And he pointed down like he was on the phone or something, like, you know, he'd be in a minute, and I wish I'd have gotten a picture of that. Because he was so happy. And he came and he ate, and we had time. His dad and I had time with him. And then Tuesday was the 15th, and he went to work, and I didn't see him that day. And Wednesday morning, I woke up, and I said I finally slept, and his dad was staying at the house at the time. We weren't together, but I'd said my prayers that morning, and I got a text from his boss that said, "Do you know why Jesse didn't show up for work?" And my heart just sunk. And I started calling him and texting him and calling him and texting him. And I told his dad, I said, "I'm calling the police." And he said, "Don't do that." And I kept calling his phone and calling the house manager and calling his phone. And finally somebody answered my son's phone. And I just said, "Where's my son? Where's my baby?" And all I heard was, "I'm sorry to inform you." And that's all I heard. That's all I remember hearing. My child was dead. 5 days in a sober home. They found him dead on the top bunk of his bed with 10 other people in that house. And I don't have my baby anymore. Cody doesn't have his brother. And our world just changed. I remember walking out to the backyard, and I went out on the deck, and I remember seeing the cars going up and down the road, and I couldn't understand why they were driving. Don't you know, my child just died? Why? Like, my world has just stopped. But all around me, there was still noise and cars and people, and I couldn't understand that. And then began the journey of 1,000 questions. The story I was told was that they went to a meeting on Tuesday night, and Jesse fell asleep downstairs on a couch. Somebody else was there in the house, in the sober home, in Stella house, and said he woke up around 3 or 3:30 in the morning and said, "Man, I got to go to bed. I got to go to work in the morning." That's not my son. Jesse lived with me. I know his schedule. I know his routine. And his alarm goes off on his phone at 4:30 in the morning. So they didn't find anything around him. There was no drugs found around him. It doesn't make sense. Because if Jesse was going to use, he wouldn't have used in a house full of people. He was such an introvert, very shy. He didn't take with people that quick. It took a long time to get in his very small inner circle. He would have used on his way to work by himself, more private. His alarm went off for 2 hours and 31 minutes before the call to 911 came in, 7:01. There was a person underneath his bed. And as the time progressed, the days, the weeks, the months, even a year, I started finding out more information. It takes a lot to have these conversations. It takes a lot to understand and process when your child has died what's going on. And so there was a young man that had come out to the house. I'd gone to the house a couple times and went that night. And I went 4 days later to pick up his work boots. And a young man came out to me, and I couldn't understand why he was so upset. And it took me almost a year to realize he was the one that found my son, and he isn't even in the police report. Annapolis City Police Detective Larry Dilianibus was the one, I guess, on call. And there's a very small report written up about my son. 4 people were interviewed out of 10 in a house where somebody dies. That's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And I spent every single month down at Annapolis City Police Department once a month being passed around from officer to officer to officer, trying to find answers. They never took his phone. There was no criminal investigation into my son's death. They ruled it an accident. So I worked with the medical examiner in Baltimore, Maryland, to explain to him what had happened. And he talked to the police department and called me back, and he said, I said, this was not an accident. This is fentanyl poisoning. My child was murdered, and he was poisoned to death. These aren't overdoses. These are murders. These are poisonings. And the wording needs to change because the drug has changed and the whole game has changed. And I don't even want to call it a game. It's not. But fentanyl has changed this. And so he changed it from accident to undetermined and fentanyl poisoning, which is exactly what it was. They don't know how Jesse died. I don't know how my son ingested that if nothing was found around him. And so I finally spoke with Chief Jackson of Annapolis City Police Department last year in June, and he looked me straight in the face, act like he was concerned about my son, said, tell me about Jesse, and said, give me 2 weeks, I'm going to look into this. We're in the end of May of 2024. I have not heard from that man. He did not respond to any one of my phone calls, nor my emails, nor my letters. I got passed around again, and I've got nothing but lip service. I filed a internal affairs report with Annapolis City Police Department. You're basically asking the same police department to investigate their own. It's just not fair. It's not right. And it takes a lot of emotional energy when a family has to go through this part of it as well as on top of the loss of a child to have to continue. So I'm 2 years and 3 months into this with no answers. No answers. No support from the police department, no support from state's attorney's office. Mayor's office didn't respond. Governor's office hasn't responded. It's an everyday battle. I have his phone. It's locked. I've asked them to get into it. And I got excuse after excuse with the one police officer. Well, one officer, he said we could take it, but if another case came in that was high priority, it would get bumped down the line. Then he made excuses that their machine wasn't working or that an iPhone was easier to get into than a Samsung phone. I've tried numerous times. Even with that said, the kids these days, everybody from Maryland is getting their drugs from Baltimore City street corners, the dealers that are on the streets, is what it seems like. You know, can't answer for everybody, but there was no drug dealer that my sons really knew that I'm aware of that, you know, they had a so-called relationship with. It was just going to the street corners of Baltimore, where everybody in the state of Maryland and West Virginia and Virginia come from to go to. You know, I explained it to people. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know this person. So I don't know how to be anybody but the person I was before my child died. But I'm not that person. So I don't know this new person, yet I'm not this old person. It's a very bizarre world to live in. I feel like I've been put on another planet with no backpack, no survival gear, no travel guide, and said, figure it out. And what I did from day one immediately was I worked for a statewide nonprofit for many years and worked with lots of families with substance use. So thankfully, I had many good connections and providers in the state of Maryland. Everybody was very supportive of me, and I'm very blessed to have had so many moms and providers come out and help me. But, you know, I just went into advocacy mode, and I shared Jesse's story when and where I could. We don't want anybody else to experience this pain. I got a billboard put up in Annapolis last year because my fight is about good recovery homes and bad recovery homes. And I know several people that own really good recovery homes here in Annapolis, and they do everything that they can to support the people that are in their homes, and I fully support them. The house that my son was in, that Jesse was in, is Stella Recovery House, and it was not a good house, but I didn't know that at the time, or I would have never let him walk through those doors. I had no idea. We thought that he would get the same supports that his brother did in this community, and he didn't. There was a lot of shady stuff. The police knew about Stella House. Other providers knew about Stella House. People in the recovery community knew about Stella House. Mom didn't. I didn't. Jesse didn't. And so, I had a billboard put up, and Jesse didn't think he could speak up. I don't know what went on behind those closed doors in that small amount of time. I know the conversation that I had and the text that I had with him on Tuesday before he passed was troubling, as far as I felt the stress in him. But, you have a voice and you have a choice, and people need to know that they can speak out if they're in a recovery home and they're there to get their life back and something is not right there. They need to come to somebody that they can trust. They come to me. We'll find you another home to go to. We'll find you supports. But we need to know what's good and what's not, what's working and what's bad. We need to know these things in order to help people. Everybody deserves a chance. My child's life mattered, and it still matters. He didn't deserve to die, and he didn't want to die. He didn't want to die. He was happy. He was happy. So, I do what a lot of families do, is share his story. I got a sign put up on the side of the road. I got a billboard put up. We do these things to educate and bring awareness to people. There's still people that don't know about fentanyl, or they think it can't happen to them. Fentanyl does not discriminate. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white, rich or poor, old or young. We're losing babies to this. And young teenagers that have never even used, or they think they're getting a Valium or a Xanax or an Adderall or Percocet, and they're getting pure fentanyl. So these kids are just dropping. We had chances at recovery years ago. We had chances, heroin, we had chances of recovery, fentanyl, carfentanil, xylazine. These kids aren't getting these chances anymore at recovery. And law enforcement, you would think that they would be, and I can't speak for every law enforcement. I know that there's amazing law enforcement out there, and I'm thankful for each and every one of them. But what I'm experiencing with Jesse is not supportive from Annapolis City Police Department. I would think that they're tired of fentanyl, and they should be sending their letters to their delegates and their senators and their governors and saying, we've had enough of this, because it's quadrupled their workload. Without fentanyl, we wouldn't be losing all these people that we're losing. It's not acceptable. It's not okay.